Last fall, a Democrat called Tony DeLuca got reelected to the Pennsylvania State House while dead. Now, by any measure, that is embarrassing. Pennsylvania Democrats elected a dead man. They knew they were doing it. They did it anyway. This would seem to defeat the idea of representative democracy, which is that you vote for people so they can represent you. But party leaders in Pennsylvania were not embarrassed. They were proud. Quote, "We are proud to see the voters continue to show their confidence in him and his commitment to democratic values by re-electing him posthumously." In other words, electing a guy who can't possibly represent you is not an offense against democracy. It's the essence of democracy. And actually, it makes a kind of sense when you remember that it was also in the state of Pennsylvania the Democratic Party leaders backed a Senate candidate called John Fetterman long after he had suffered a massive stroke and could no longer talk or communicate clearly.
And guess what? That bridge was rebuilt less than a year, well in front of time. And now I'm standing next to the president again, next to a collapsed bridge here. And he is here to commit to work with the governor and the delegation to make sure that we get this fixed quick, fast as well, too. This is a president that is committed to infrastructure. Yeah, and then on top of that, the jewel kind of law of the inflation bill.
What in the hell is he talking about?
2 days before the Democratic Senate primary in Pennsylvania back in May, staffers for the John Fetterman campaign announced that their candidate had tragically suffered a stroke. But no problem. In a written statement purportedly written by John Fetterman himself from the hospital, Fetterman announced that he was absolutely fine. "I'm feeling much better," the statement read. "Doctors tell me I didn't suffer any cognitive damage." Okay, so the primary continued as planned with Fetterman's name on the ballot, and Fetterman won. He became the Democratic nominee. And that was the last that most voters heard about John Fetterman's stroke. For months, Fetterman remained in semi-seclusion. Then as the campaign progressed and the polls tightened, he began to venture out. He had no choice. And video clips surfaced of Fetterman speaking at rallies in what seemed to be a bizarre and highly disjointed way. Some began to wonder if he'd really suffered, quote, no cognitive damage from his stroke. It was at this point that Fetterman's personal physician, a man called Clifford Chen, who also happened to be a campaign donor to him and other Democrats, rushed forward to bring science to bear on this question. In Clifford Chen's considered opinion as a respected medical professional who works at a major research university, John Fetterman was absolutely fine. Then Fetterman appeared on stage for his first and only debate and settled this question for all time.
John Fetterman knocked himself out the second he opened his mouth.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
What? So that was the moment right at the top that you know this was not a debate like the debates you'd seen before.
It only got worse from there.
2018 interview, you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all. I never have." But earlier this month, you told an interviewer, quote, "I support fracking. I support the energy independence that we should have here in the United States." So, Mr. Fetterman, please explain your changing position. 60 seconds.
I've always supported fracking.
I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all." So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand, and I do support fracking.
Is it over yet?
So that was something.
All politicians flip-flop from time to time, but most of them come up with a reason why they change their position. Not Fetterman. Fetterman just lies.
I've always supported fracking.
Yeah, fracking. No, I don't support fracking at all, and I never have. I don't support fracking. I think it's something that has to eventually go away.
It became clear during the debate early on that Fetterman wasn't well. And the moderator asked him respectfully when he'd be releasing his medical records.
You know, I believe if my doctor believes that I'm fit to serve, and that's what I believe is appropriate, and I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served.
Follow up, I didn't hear you say you would release your full medical records. Why not? You have 30 seconds.
No, again, my Dr. L believes that I'm fit to be serving, and that's what I believe is where I'm standing.
Fetterman's doctor is a big-time Democrat donor, and he and John won't release the records. Nearly every sane person who watched that debate felt sorry for John Fetterman and felt sorry for the voters of Pennsylvania who've been deceived about his condition.
John Fetterman had a script. He was reading it, but he was still incapable of following that script.
I thought somebody should have invoked the mercy rule about 20 minutes into the debate.
What we saw today was someone who is not ready to be in office. Like, I found it extremely hard to watch.
I thought this was the unraveling of one of the biggest scandals going on in this midterm cycle. The covering up and the lying about the status of John Fetterman.
That's not a man who can work with no restrictions in the U.S. Senate. Far from it. And everyone watching, every honest person, would come to that conclusion. We could play you a lot of clips like that. You've probably seen them already today. But not everyone is an honest person. And to prove it, we're going to show you how MSNBC covered this debate the moment it ended.
Clearly, this was a candidate who was feeling stress, and there was such intense scrutiny, often ableist scrutiny, on how he was going to communicate. And he just did a debate in front of, the nation, an audience of anyone who could listen. And it was so transparent. He did fumble. He did make verbal mistakes. And it was all on view. But I think it's also really interesting. You played a lot of clips. There were moments where he was really strong, including that Bernie Sanders clip, including his very fluent and direct response on raising the minimum wage. I thought was a really strong moment.
He was facing ableist scrutiny. Because we're literal and we can't control ourselves, you just heard her say that Fetterman had a strong answer to a question. Talk about patronizing, by the way. Well, we thought we'd go and check what was his answer. You can assess for yourself whether this was, quote, strong. Here it is.
What do you say to small business owners who have told us that if the minimum wage were increased to $15 an hour, it would put them out of business? You have 30 seconds.
Now, we all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full-time, you should be able to live in dignity as well, true. And I believe they haven't have any businesses we can't have businesses being subsidized by not paying individuals that just simply can't afford to pay their own way.
Okay, again, we could fill the hour recapping John Fetterman's sad responses.
And then afterwards, the excuses flowed like Snapple through Joe Biden's pants.
John Fetterman clearly has some speech struggles because of his stroke, but his authenticity was there.
I think under the circumstances, John Fetterman, having had a stroke, actually did very well.
The Republican Party's running a bunch of ads about showing Fetterman stumbling on things because of the stroke. What kind of a doctor is behind that? Aren't you supposed to do no harm?
He had some really, really strong comebacks.
Fetterman lost the battle last night, but may have won the war.
Wait a second. Who actually had the stroke here?
So we just keep clips like that around just for future historians to assess what went wrong in America.
I kind of get the naked ambition of a guy like Fetterman and his wife. He wants to be in the Senate. That kind of makes sense. To me, it's the reporters. It's the how the media is trying to cover for this. It reminds me of the old, parable you remember of the emperor with no clothes. The fool is the emperor, but the real fool are the people who are applauding at the wonderful outfit that he's supposedly wearing when he's actually stark naked.
Now you have me thinking of Fetterman naked.
It's not really that surprising to anyone who's been following John Fetterman for the past 5 months. You knew that he was profoundly cognitively impaired, and it turns out he is. So you learn really not that much new about him. What you learn is that everyone around him From his doctor to his wife to the media to the Democratic Party, they're all liars. And they all just got caught lying.
And the fact that the Democratic Party hid this from the voters of Pennsylvania and continued to foist Fetterman on them when it's clear he can't listen and communicate effectively is one of the most disrespectful things I've seen in a long time. Hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania voters have already voted early. John Fetterman and the Democrats already knew he wasn't up for the job, but they weren't straight with the people of Pennsylvania.
And the media propped him up as a hero. And then when Dasha Burns of NBC News actually had a conversation with him, she said he could not actually comprehend basic conversation.
It did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversations.
Oh, that's not allowed. So here you have a young reporter who clearly doesn't know the rules. No matter what you actually see or experience or report, you can't reveal anything that might hurt the fortunes of the Democratic Party.
And she was eviscerated by other members of the media for simply reporting what she had observed.
Liberals tried to destroy her. Rebecca Traister again of New York Magazine said Fetterman, quote, is not at all impaired. He understands everything. Molly Jong-Fast said she spoke to Fetterman and, quote, he understood everything I was saying and he was funny.
And then a couple of days later, he does that debate against Dr. Oz, and it was apparent to the whole country who watched that he has no business being in the Senate. But because there were so many early votes that came about, well, that was the end of that. He ends up winning that Senate seat in Pennsylvania. And then what happens after he's inaugurated, after he's put into office? He's not at the hospital not once, but twice. Once for lightheadedness, and then another time for clinical depression, where he spent weeks at Walter Reed.
He was so close to the edge that within weeks of getting to Washington, he wound up in a mental hospital as an inpatient. He has not appeared in public since. And we're supposed to think that's not a big deal. We're not even supposed to think about it. So the problem with this is not John Fetterman himself. Once again, it's impossible not to feel sad for John Fetterman. Society should do its best to help people suffering from problems like depression or schizophrenia or whatever. The problem is that a society that elevates people who are mentally ill is doomed. Wouldn't a functional society elevate people to positions of leadership who are the wisest, the smartest, the sanest, who had the greatest degree of foresight and emotional self-control? Yes, it would. They would not intentionally put people in positions of authority who were incompetent. They would not allow John Fetterman to write railroad safety legislation from his bed in the psych ward. That is, pardon the description, insane.
But they're so power mad, they let a clearly unwell man fall apart on live TV, which is really the job of Joe Biden's staff. Stay in your lane, Fetterman.
Biden, of course, will celebrate this as a new glass ceiling shattered, as if we're all empowered by being governed by people who can't think straight. But this is a dead end, this road. This way of thinking is destructive for everyone. It's not empowering, it's grotesque. And if we continue, we might wind up with people dressed in admirals' outfits pretending to be women. That could happen.
I am honored to serve as the first female four-star officer of the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps.
Barack Obama cut an ad for John Fetterman just a few days ago. He's not ashamed to do that. His argument, of course, abortion again. Watch.
That's why I'm asking you to vote for John Fetterman this election day, November 8th. So when the fate of our democracy and a woman's right to choose are on the line, I know John will fight for Pennsylvanians. You can count on John Fetterman. Make sure he can count on you.
Senator John Fetterman grilled a bank executive today who got bailed out by the government. Listen.
Do you believe that it's a running joke in the circles of banking that no matter how bad we behave, we're gonna be pulled, we're gonna be saved? Take it, anyone.
Senator, I don't believe that's the case.
Cool. So by having John Fetterman grill bank executives, the bank executives are getting bailed out again. Here's some more.
Is it staggering? Is it a staggering responsibility that the head of a bank could literally crash our economy? It's astonishing. That's like if you have, I mean, like, and they also realize is that now they have a guaranteed way to be saved by how, you know. So it's you know, isn't it appropriate that this kind of control should be more stricter to prevent this kind of thing from going? Or should we just go on and start bailing and sailing whoever bank, regardless of how their conduct is?
Was that a question? The banker never even responded to it because no one could tell if it was a question or not. Here's more.
Shouldn't you have a working requirement after we sail your bank with billions of your bank? Because they seem to be more preoccupied than SNAP and requirements for works for hungry people, but not about protecting the taxpayers, you know, that will bail no matter whatever does about a bank to crash it. Chair?
Thank you, Senator Fetterman. I didn't see an eagerness on the panel to answer your questions. Thank you.
Because they didn't even know what he was asking. John Fetterman's the greatest thing that's ever happened to bank executives. Instead of being asked tough, penetrating questions, the bank executives they coast. And they nod, and that's it. And nobody expects him to say anything. We all just wait around for Fetterman to finish, and then we feel sorry for him. Now, remember, Minnie Madoff paid for Fetterman's Senate seat in Pennsylvania. What a return on an investment.
Fetterman's candidacy, like Joe Biden's candidacy 2 years ago, tells us something pretty dark about the Democratic Party. What it tells us is the Democratic Party has such contempt for voters and for democracy itself, and so much confidence in its ownership of the media and of big tech, that it no longer has to try to win your votes. And to prove it, they can even run mentally defective candidates who can barely speak and not only expect them to win, but expect you to accept the outcome no matter how transparently absurd it is. On November 9th, they'll be telling you that John Fetterman got 81 million votes in Pennsylvania, and they'll threaten to put you in jail if you don't believe it. Why wouldn't they do that? They work with Joe Biden.
Persuasion doesn't matter anymore. Neither does talent or qualifications, for that matter. With the Democrats mastering mail-in ballots, drop boxes, ballot harvesting, they can nominate a can of tuna fish and drag it across the finish line in the general. Democrats aren't even looking for bright candidates anymore. Being smart and independent disqualifies you in Democratic politics. They're looking for dumb rubber stampers who shatter.
Who is co-signing and introducing legislation from Senator Fetterman's office while he himself is currently hospitalized and under current medical observation? Oh, no answer. No answer. Gentleson just blocked Stephen Miller in response.
How many times have we shown you Senator Kennedy asking Biden's nominees basic questions, having them sit there and go, But that's the whole point. If you're qualified, you might actually see things objectively and occasionally rule against Democrat policies. But if you're a lightweight who shatters, hey, you're just happy to be there. You don't have to think. You just rule from the bench like an actress. Smack the gavel down the same way every time.
And as if to prove it, Dianne Feinstein has been a senator from California for more than 30 years. She's now 89, the oldest member of Congress, and she is sadly completely out of it. Last month, she learned that her staff had announced her retirement from the Senate. She had no idea. Watch this.
I haven't made that decision. I haven't released anything. It will be my plan. You put out the statement?
Put out your statement.
I didn't know they put it out.
Okay.
So it is what it is.
We put out your statement, Feinstein's staff informs her. We've decided you're leaving your job. And no, we didn't tell you because we don't care what you think. You're just the senator. Shut up and vote. And Dianne Feinstein just kind of nods and accepts it. Keep in mind, this person sits on the, quote, Intelligence Committee in the United States Senate.
Mr. Fetterman,
Mr. Fetterman,
Yeah,
you need any help?
I'm running for the U.S. Senate, kid. I need all the help I can get.
You're running for Senate?
Sure.
Where's your suit and your flag pin and your hair?
Oh, hey, kid.
I just want you to know I'd vote for you.
Hey, thanks, kid.
You want a drink?
Nah, no.
Really, you can have it.
Okay. Thanks.
See you around.
Hey, kid. Catch.
Wow, thanks, Mayor John.
That person is obviously mentally ill, but so are the rest of us if we accept it as normal.